The sixth. Like the first three men, the sixth was robed in white, with white hair and beard. His eyes swirled with his travels through worlds of differing belief, but within his eyes those beliefs were concentrated into one by his long-standing determined adherence to his thought. He looked into the traveler's eyes and then bowed his head before speaking. I was in conflict with my predecessor with whom you last spoke. He and I attached ourselves to different approaches to the understanding of life. Whereas he worked to inject our line into one particular foreign system, and whereas he adhered to that tradition, keeping it as close to our heart as possible, I adhered to the study of many systems, understanding them as part of our line. I studied every developed system I could find, and understood them all within one context. I took the gods to be the incarnations of aspects of the unity of all. From those gods emanated the different aspects of universal spirit. For each aspect of man and nature, God lived, breathed, and ruled. These gods were, in my view, the fundamental representations of all that emanated from their distinct and particular spheres. Together they were the fullness of nothingness. Separate, they emanated all life from their specific and individual souls. In this way, I understood the old world of the many gods within the context of our line of the unity. I understood that these gods maintained the hierarchy of the divine, all of that which is superior in form to man. My comprehension of their existence set me at odds with the rising tradition of which my colleague just spoke. My comprehension would lose to his, though mine was the more correct. He is here because he gave life to that which would have died. He maintained that to which I and others adhered. He did not realize the extent to which he did so, just as he did not realize the damaging extent of the monopolization of thought that his institution imposed. It was that very institution that commandeered the second son's tradition, corrupted it, and with it occupied, by way of conquest and fear, the known world. Whereas he stood close to the heart of the new tradition, injecting our old line into its bloodstream, I stood on the outside. I would, by my complete systematization of the thought of our line, influence from the outside not only the new tradition, but also its later cousin that would save man's intellect from destruction. The traveler spoke. You comprehended the many gods, and I know you were not the first, even in your time. There is much in between man and the unity of all. Your predecessor was concerned at the distance between man and God, for his tradition required a closer relation between the two. But as you are able to see, there must be stages between, infinite stages, filling the gap between what man knows and the entirety of all. At each of those infinite stages stands a God that rules all of that of which he consists, all of that which emanates from him, all of that which lies within the scope of his influence. The greatest comprehension of fundamental reality that man's perspective allows is infinitely limited in comparison to what actually exists. Man comprehends that which is relevant to his existence, but man's existence is infinitely limited in scope. Man's existence is also infinite in scope. Like the gods, men are ethereal representations of influence over lesser manifestation. Man, living his given life, influences to the extent of his influence held, regardless of whether that influence is perceived. By maintaining the old line, your predecessor assisted the possibility that your exterior view would be in the future welcomed by those of intellect that existed in his world. He, as a foundational element within his tradition, made possible the reintroduction of your line at a later time, though never in the form you comprehended. They maintained their own version of the divinities, as well as their own periodic destructive response to such comprehension. But their comprehension was based in a corrupted adherence to a position that meant they sought the succor of those divinities. They failed to use their knowledge as guiding inspiration to manifest driven movement towards the more perfect points those divinities represented. It is that which the new tradition lacked, and that your line held, the individual responsibility of each man to strive infinitely towards that which would always be beyond. The sixth man spoke. But what of the book? It must have held truth. It spread so wide, touched so many. The traveler responded. That is not enough for truth. Truth is not the only force that draws adherence. Popularity is not a measure of greatness. It is a sign of the opposite. The man, his head low before the traveler, spoke. You are the son of a god. We were, but for the first, mere men requested by your father in dream to maintain a line of thought. We kept the wood alive. Now we pass it to you." The man turned and walked away from the traveller. Like the others, he walked 12 paces, and then as he turned, the 11 others came into view, standing in an arc across the width of the road. As he took his place, the next one came forward, approached the traveller.